Okay, welcome everyone. I am so excited to have all of you joining us on this webinar. My name is Lara Hodgson. I am the co-founder, president, and CEO of Now Corp. And I'm also joined today by Samantha Ettus, who is the founder and CEO of Park Place Payments. And we cannot be more excited to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour with you, sharing some of our experiences, some of our perspectives on how we are disrupting the payment space. Go women. And also just some of the innovations that we are seeing that we think are really going to be game changers for you as small business owners or as people who maybe work with small businesses or for small businesses or small businesses that are hopefully soon going to be not so small businesses. We really want to touch on a couple of things during our conversation today. One is really kind of the importance of payments. Payments is one of those things that, to be honest, most of us view as very sort of administrative. It's somewhat bothersome that you have to deal with it every week. But there are some really great innovations in the works and coming out that are really going to be game changers, that are going to take payments from being that kind of boring, tactical, I got to do it on Friday, to really a strategic lever that you can use for your business as you grow. So we're going to share some of those with you that we're aware of. And then we're also just going to talk about examples of how we've seen people strategically use these things to grow their business. And hopefully it will inspire even more innovation from you. So I will start out. My name, as I said, is Lara Hodgson. I am the president and CEO of Now Corp. And Sam, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll get started.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say I completely disagree with Lara. I think payments are fun, sexy. They're just the most incredible thing ever. And I can't wait to talk about them today, like we do every day. But I'm not even joking. I really think that they're so much fun. And meeting Lara was super exciting for me because it was so awesome to meet another woman who felt as strongly as I did that there needed to be change in this industry. So I am the founder and CEO of Park Place Payments, which is a company that is basically trying to disrupt, or we are disrupting, the payment processing industry, which is not hard to disrupt because it's one of those industries that is a little bit like a relic of the past. So with even just small changes, we've been able to make a big difference, and I'm excited to talk to you about it today.
Well, and Sam, you are absolutely right. There's nothing sexier than getting paid, right? So nothing could be better than show me my money now, right? So, Sam, it's interesting that you brought up payments is an industry that has very few women in it at all. And it's a very old industry. It's an industry that's been around really since the beginning of time, obviously. What inspired you to get into payments? So maybe share your story and then I'll share what inspired me to get into payments.
Sure. So about 10 years ago, I do a lot of public speaking, and I was at a conference that was kind of a boondoggle conference for the top sales organizations in the credit card processing industry. And at the time, I was mostly focused on helping women with managing their professional and personal lives. And I was giving advice through a radio show and books and speaking. And I arrived there and there were 20 guys who ran the top organizations in credit card processing. And one was kind of more, I don't want to use the word, I guess, cheesy than the other. They were very flashy. All of them had arrived on private planes. And I said, I don't understand. Where are the women? Where are the people of color? And they kind of laughed at me and said, oh, there are none in this industry. And at that moment, I thought, okay, I'm going to come back and crush these guys one day. Like there's no reason that these guys should be on top. So I thought, okay, I'll do that when I'm in my 60s, 70s, like there's no rush. But then about 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, I was on book tour for my last book, and I was speaking at tons of companies, Target, Google, Twitter, and then I would also speak at women's conferences. And the one group of women I couldn't help were the women who left the workforce and wanted to return in a meaningful way. And a lot of them had started selling makeup and skincare to their friends and not even making martini money. And then I noticed that there were other populations who'd been sidelined. There were, people who were middle-aged, who were victims of ageism. There were people of color who weren't making what they're worth. And I just felt like there needed to be a company that employed those people in an honest way. And so that is what inspired me to launch Park Place. And so we've basically married this old industry with a new kind of sales force.
That's fantastic. Well, and it's so interesting. I also came from outside the industry. In fact, I am certain that if my finance professor from business school knew that I was even touching the world of payments and finance, he would fall out of his chair. Because I was sort of a serial entrepreneur. I'm an engineer by background. And I had started a children's product called Nourish, which was a spill-proof bottled water for kids when I became a mother and my child was spilling things in the back of my car. And as I started to sell that product into small retailers and small distributors, everything worked great because most of my customers paid me with a credit card. And so I would ship 10 cases to the LA airport and they would give me a purchasing card and I would get paid that day. And I thought, oh, this business thing is pretty easy, right? I had visions of being on the cover of Fortune. And then about a year into the business, we got our first big order from Whole Foods. And at the time, I high-fived my business partner, Stacey Abrams, who had co-founded Nourish with me. And we started thinking about, oh my gosh, this order is like a truckload. It's not even cases anymore. We're shipping truckloads across the country to distribution centers. And all of a sudden, sort of mid-air, our high five didn't actually hit, because we started to do the math in our head and we realized that we were going to have to give net 30 terms, which means I'm going to give you the product and you're going to pay me 30 days later. And we thought, ooh, well, we don't really love that idea, that we have to spend the money to acquire the product and make it and deliver it, and we're not going to get paid for 30 days. But it was the cost of doing business. So we took the order and said we'd figure it out later. The problem is net 30 doesn't mean you get paid in 30 days. It's just a suggestion. And we quickly realized that our business was going to grow to death because our customers were using us as the free bank. And everybody told us we could solve that by getting a line of credit or trying to use factoring. And we just kept thinking, why are we borrowing money? We're the lender here. Why doesn't our customer just pay us faster? Why won't they pay us with a credit card? And that's when we discovered that sometimes businesses will pay with a credit card, which is awesome, but sometimes they won't. They demand an invoice and they have way more power than we do. And so we decided to create Now Account so that small suppliers could elect to get paid in a way that feels exactly like taking a credit card when one isn't offered. So the amazing thing, as I listen to Sam's story and now share my story, we both came at this from totally outside the industry, but we've created sort of the two sides of the coin that allow you to always get paid immediately. And there's nothing better than getting paid immediately. So if your customer offers you a card, you should take the card. And if your customer won't offer you a card, now there's a way that you can also get paid immediately.
And what was the reaction of the big companies when you launched this?
Actually, the big companies love it because if you think about it, if you are supplying a big company and they get your invoice, they barely read it. They schedule it for payment when they want to pay. And what typically happens is somewhere along the way, you start calling the accounts payable department saying, where is my check? I haven't gotten paid. Please pay me this week. I really need to get paid, which is not a really good negotiating position to be begging your customer for payment. It's really hard to make the call the next day and try to sell more product.
Right.
And so what we heard from the big customers is that it's actually inefficient for them, for their accounts payable staff to be fielding calls all day from what they call the screamers. And the screamers are all their small suppliers that call every day looking for payment. And so when we went to folks like Coca-Cola and said, look, we can get your small and diverse suppliers paid immediately, and then they won't call you anymore. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal, because large companies actually do want to help small business. They would love to buy more products and services, but they're big and they take time to approve invoices and process them. And so if their suppliers can get paid immediately, that actually helps them build a more sustainable supply chain. So it's really a win-win for everyone.
That's so amazing. And I love the fact that you're solving both sides of the problem, right?
Right.
So you are solving the problem for small business owners and you're also solving the problem for the big behemoths, which is amazing.
Right. Well, and you've done the same thing if you think about it, because you are innovating in payments, but you're also solving a whole societal challenge of getting people into the workforce in a way that really represents their value. So what is it about as you look at all the different payment programs that you provide, where do you see the real value for your clients? I mean, because you're doing some very innovative things in the way that you work with your clients.
Yeah, I think for us, what was so interesting going into an industry, and you probably can relate, an industry where when you say, why is it done that way? And someone says, well, because it's always been done that way. I love hearing that because that's the first, the first clue that it's not being done the right way or the most efficient way or the most modernized way. And years ago, a lot of people say to me, well, I don't understand, why do they need a middleman? Why does American Express and MasterCard, Visa need a middleman? Why can't we just go directly to them? Years ago, Amex and MasterCard and Visa sort of toyed with the idea of getting rid of this middleman, but it's impossible. And in fact, as payment solutions have become more sophisticated, that middleman, in many cases in our company, it's a middle woman, but that middle person is actually more necessary than ever before. It's almost like if you went to Best Buy and you're buying some new electronic and you said, oh, I need some help. And they said, oh, there's no one on the floor to help you. You just navigate the entire store yourself. Because there are so many solutions, it's more essential than ever that you have someone hand-holding you through the process. Now, the other thing is we will sometimes approach a business and we'll say, oh, who does your payments? And they'll say, oh, we've been working with Bank of America, let's say, for 20 years. And we'll say, okay, so then why aren't you accepting Apple Pay? And they'll say, oh, I don't know. We've had this terminal for a while. But that same person will say, oh, we have great service. And then when you dig in a little deeper, you're like, okay, the person who's servicing you doesn't really care about your business if they haven't even upgraded you to Apple Pay, right? So a lot of it is also, it's not just making sure your clients are getting serviced when there's a problem. It's also being proactive and making sure that they're compliant with all the new fraud regulations. In our industry, it's called PCI compliance. We have to make sure that they're up to date on all the latest technology because the consumer is more involved in payments than ever before. And so their demands require it. Now, the biggest growth area in payments is B2B. Because it is, and that's why I'm so excited about our partnership, because I love the fact that we basically are creating this suite of solutions for a business to say to their customers, we have your back, whatever you want to do, whatever works best for your company, we have that payment solution.
Yeah. Well, and it's true because if you think about the evolution of payments, payments is not something that people used to talk about a lot. And I think COVID really illuminated how critical payments are to the strategy of a business. And, it's interesting. I was on some panels right when COVID hit, and everybody was talking about how small businesses need access to capital. And immediately everybody went to making more loans. And I sort of raised my hand and I thought, do you not know that the word loan and the word capital are not synonyms? Like the fact that you need capital doesn't mean you need a loan. In fact, most businesses need loans only because they already gave their money to somebody else. That's the only reason you need cash is you gave yours away.
Right.
And so, when I look at what COVID showed us, it showed us how important supply chains are. And of course, that was never more evident than with toilet paper, right? For whatever reason, overnight, there was no toilet paper anywhere. And yet COVID did not drive a higher need for toilet paper, nor did it kill the supply of toilet paper. But it showed that the supply chain can get out of whack. And if you think about the supply chain of cash into and through businesses, particularly small businesses, it's payments. Almost every small business gets their cash from their customers. They don't necessarily go out and borrow money and factor and do all these other things. The most important cash they have comes from their customer. So if that's true, then you would say to yourself, how can we innovate making that cash flow more? So my favorite comment is, everyone loves to say cash is king. Well, if cash is king, flow is queen. And the most important part of the word cash flow is flow. If you've ever played chess, you cannot win without the queen. And so focusing on innovations that allow your cash to flow to you faster is really where the biggest opportunity is for you to take payments and make it something strategic. But what you said, Sam, that's interesting is I think a lot of the innovation starts in the B2C side. So you have seen, and that's why you said right now it's almost overwhelming to look at all the payment options out there. You don't know where to start. You don't know how to make sense of it. So I think what you're doing at Park Place to sort of guide people through the mental exercise of discerning all of these solutions, B2B comes next. And we tend to take some of the innovations on the B2C side and then say, how do you scale it for B2B? So that's where a lot of the exciting new innovations are. But what are you seeing, at Park Place? You see kind of the best in class in every part of payments. What are some of the new things that you're seeing come out that everyone on this call should be thinking about as they go into 2021? Like how are payments going to help really launch them into growth?
Sure. So, there's a few things. One is that there's so many changes right now. And I think that because more than ever before, because of the pandemic, customers are a little more empathetic to the needs of their suppliers. And everyone is kind of in it together. There's a mentality of we want to keep businesses alive. And we know that a lot of businesses are struggling right now. And so payments is one area because of that has been tweaked a lot since the pandemic in two ways. One is the businesses that have face-to-face customers do need to accept Apple Pay. They can no longer get away with not accepting contactless payments because no one wants to touch a card and hand a card over. So that's become a huge thing. And medical offices and other kinds of offices where they interface with customers or merchants or boutiques or restaurants, whatever it might be. But the other thing that we're seeing a lot of is that we see businesses suddenly needing a new kind of solution. And that means that surcharging has become a huge thing. So surcharging is when you're basically passing along the cost of the payment to the customer. And whereas before it was a little bit taboo because people were afraid, businesses were afraid to offer that to their customers because they were afraid that their customers would judge them and think that they're trying to in some way take advantage of them. It's become more accepted than ever before. So we are seeing a surge in surcharging, people who want surcharging as an option, people who are looking for different kinds of opportunities to change the way payments are accepted. So a lot of clients will, for example, the great thing about surcharging is that if a client is paying with a debit card, they don't have to have a surcharge. So it's not like every single customer needs to accept that surcharge. They have a choice. So if they're paying with a traditional credit card, they're going to be absorbing the fee. But if they're paying with a debit card, they are not absorbing the fee. So that has just taken off in our industry. And the other thing is just that there are so many new advances in the actual point of sale systems through, online and offline that it's really evolved so much. And I think more than ever, our role is to guide our customers through the maze of choices and to make recommendations. I often equate our industry, and we were joking in the beginning about how unsexy it is or how I think it's sexy. But I often equate our industry in many ways with it's like one of those relic industries. It's almost like when you start a business, you don't get into a wine business because you love dealing with legalities and you love dealing with insurance and payments, right? Those are the headache parts of the business. And traditionally payments has come into that category of the headaches, right? So if you go into building houses, you're not going into it because of your love of payments or your love of legal.
I don't think anybody starts a business because they love finance and payments.
Exactly. So those are the headache parts of the business. And so, we've gotten used to the idea that you might have a lawyer you love and trust, and they're almost functioning as an in-house attorney, even though you might not have an in-house attorney, or you have that in-house attorney who takes that headache off of your plate. We see ourselves as that kind of outsourced payments partner, and it's more necessary than ever before. So we want to take that payments headache off of their plate, which I know is sort of your mentality as well.
Well, and that's a really good point, because typically in times of challenge or in economic challenging times, typically the best way to navigate that is to focus back on your core competencies. And that's when you typically see businesses try to focus on their core good or service, and they try to outsource other things, the things like you said, the headaches, the things you don't want to do anyway. And if you were to interview almost every business owner and ask them to rank what are the things they hate to do, it's typically chasing down payment, right? That is like the last thing you want to do in the week, because you now have to be the bad cop when you also are the good cop. And it's really hard to do both with your clients. So I do think there is a trend right now with COVID, et cetera, of people really focusing in on what it is you do and let other people help you with the things that are not your core competency. You know, you mentioned a trend in surcharges, and it got me thinking about some of the interesting things we've seen our clients do is not necessarily just take advantage of the fact that your customers may be more willing to either pay faster or take on some of that burden, but figure out where you can create value for them. So I'll give you a great example. We have a client, it's a woman-owned, minority-owned business. And when she first heard about Now Account, she resells fuel, by the way, which, you know, don't you just love it when you meet people who do things you never knew anybody did as a job? Because when I met her and she said, well, I'm a reseller of fuel. And I thought, well, who buys that? And so she has these trucks that go onto construction sites every week, and they bring all the diesel and the lubricants. And, you know, it never occurred to me that you rarely pull into a Chevron station and see a big earth mover pull in next to you. Of course, somebody does that. And so she had taken over this business from her father. And, you know, her challenge was their margins were so small. I mean, they make fractions of a penny a gallon on a gallon of diesel fuel. But the way they deliver it, you have to pay every week, right? Because if she delivers the fuel and then you use it and you don't pay her, she can't get it back. And so she said, you know, I really struggle with my own cash management, but I'm trying to think of how I could handle the cost of this payment solution of Now Account. And she said, you know, I think I'm going to try something. And so she started going out bidding on these competitive contracts, and she would bid her normal price, but then she would also offer an option B, which is I'll give you net 30 or net 60 terms, which none of her competitors did. But there's a surcharge for that. And she was essentially passing through the merchant fee that Now Account charges. And a week later, she called us and she said, oh my gosh, I've won every proposal I put out this week. Now I need to buy more trucks. And so, but what she did that was so brilliant is she changed the game, because you would say, well, why is
actually, I mean,
right.
I love that example. It's so brilliant because it's using something as a competitive advantage that has never been seen as a competitive advantage before.
That's right. Because you would say, why is her customer willing to pay a surcharge? But in their mind, they were getting something for it. They were getting 30 days, which was worth way more than the cost of the surcharge. And her competitors started calling her and saying, well, you know, how are you able to offer net 30 or net 60? And, you know, she's like, they call it the mother of invention for a reason. And but that's a perfect example of where you can look at, I think the real trend in B2B is not just thinking about the old accounts receivable or the old accounts payable or wires and ACHs, but thinking strategically about cash management, which is, if you think about cash management, then you would say to yourself, if I can get cash in faster, but it can leave slower, then that means the cash sits with me longer. And if cash sits with me, I have lots of options, because now I can go after business I never went after before. I might be able to even access some financing from a bank to get some new equipment that I couldn't do if I didn't have that cash. So anything you can do to think about how to get your cash in faster, but let it leave slower, allows you to take that kind of holistic cash management view. And especially during COVID, liquidity is key.
It also speaks to the fact that you're so focused when you have a business on your customer, and you're so focused on being as client-centric as possible with the product.
Yeah.
But the services around that product impact and reflect on your brand as well. And so if you can be client-centric in your payment offerings, it just changes the game. So that's a great example that you just gave. And I think any business that's offering almost like a menu, an a la carte menu to their customers on what's best for them, how they would like to pay, are winning the game in many ways, because it is an area that people don't think of as a client-centric area. Most people, when they think about how to accept payments, most businesses do not think what's best for my customer. They think what's best for me. And often those things are not mutually exclusive. There is a blend of the things that would be best for your customer might actually benefit you. And I think that's a great example of why.
Yeah. And that, I hadn't even thought about it that way before, that really what my client was doing was allowing the way she got paid to be a service to her customers. So I was serving her and she was passing it on as a service to her customer as well.
In a very sort of crass way, you can think of it as like if you've ever gone to a nail salon or a hair salon and you can pay with a credit card, but then they make you tip in cash. It's such a pain. And then you have to touch dirty money and you have to use your credit card. And it somehow feels like you're bearing the burden of their system. Right. Because they want people to get their tips faster, whatever it is. This is kind of the opposite of that. We're saying, okay, you have all these options. What's best for you?
Right.
And, you notice when you go to a hair salon or a nail salon and they don't do that, where they accept tips on a credit card and you're like so grateful for it. That's a very micro, example of what we're doing.
Well, and I think what technology is going to enable as we go forward is it's going to enable the person getting paid to choose how and when to accept a payment, independent of how their customer chooses when and how to make the payment, right? Because to your point, that those two were always linked before. And if my customer wanted to pay in one way, I either had to accept it or I had to, argue and negotiate with my client. And it was always a give and take. If they got what they wanted, I didn't get what I wanted. If they wanted to take longer to pay, I had to wait to get paid. If they wanted to, pay with a wire, I had to deal with the fee of the wire. So I think what you're saying is there's going to be a whole world of opportunity out there for us to think about how and when you want to get paid may not change how and when your customer chooses to pay. And that's a great service to your customer. It's a service to both of you to let both optimize their own experience.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, the other thing that's happened post-COVID is that we've seen that businesses can actually expand by having online payment options that they didn't have before. Because as we interact with customers and people differently, this webinar is an example, right? We might have had this event in person if it were a year ago or a year from now, but it enables us to communicate differently. And so it also enables us to pay people differently. And I think that as customers and our interactions with customers change, it's more important than ever that we have, very technologically forward solutions for how people get paid and how we get paid.
And how are you seeing, I'm so fascinated by your model of, essentially giving women that are coming back into the workforce, or, people that are maybe middle-aged or people that are in minority categories. What is it about payments and what is it about these folks that makes it such a good match? Why are they so uniquely positioned to promote payments and sell payments?
Yeah, I think, this industry has about 40,000 middlemen, and they've been traditionally like a lot like used car salesmen. In fact, The Atlantic did an expose on the industry a couple of years ago where they said that most of the people come from the used car sales industry. So it's one of the only industries where if you and I have stores on the same block and you have Lara's bookstore and I have, Sam's restaurant, even though we might be buying the same exact product, we will be charged different rates. And they'll go into Laura's bookstore and say, I bet I could get Lara to pay 3%, and I bet I could get Sam to pay 3.5%, whatever it is. So they're charging us different things for the exact same product. It's hard to think of many products that are still out there like that, right? A price, most products have a price. And so one of the things I realized is like there's such a lack of honesty in this industry. It's crazy when you find an industry that can be disrupted simply by being honest
Yeah.
and simply by having a trustworthy person sell a product. And so I thought, I remember being my first annual conference, and there was a bunch of my competitors there, and they were constantly talking about their biggest problem. And their biggest problem is that they were fighting over these guys. They couldn't keep these guys on their team. And I thought to myself, why are you looking in such a small pool? What about all these other really talented people that have been on the sidelines or capped in maybe an industry where they couldn't make XYZ amount and need a side hustle or need this as a full-time thing? Why are you not offering that opportunity to people from outside the industry? Because this is not that complicated, but people want to trust the person they're working with. And right now that Salesforce is not trustworthy. And so we've been able to collect an incredible group of people that are either current professionals or former professionals from different fields who bring a different perspective to it and really care about helping businesses. And so that's probably the one criteria we look for, are people who really care about helping small businesses or helping businesses. In fact, our sort of thing that we do differently from our competitors is we offer a payment checkup for free. So any business can come to us and do a comparison of their existing pricing, service, and technology to what Park Place offers. And then they can see if it makes sense to switch. Now, most people in my industry think we're crazy, but at least 10% of the time we'll go back to people and say, stick with what you have. In this industry, that is unheard of. People are like, you said to stay with my existing process. And I'm like, yeah, you have a great relationship. You have solid pricing and you have really up-to-date technology. Doesn't make sense to switch right now. And people are shocked. But I can't then tell people to switch with any sort of credibility if we don't also tell people sometimes to stick with what they have. And I think that's the important thing about a payment checkup, is that it's truly a data-driven, honest model of whether you should stick with what you have or is there a better solution out there. And so that kind of ethos goes through in all of our training, and it goes through our culture, and just all of our account executives are people who love the mission and want to be helpful to small businesses, while at the same time, we're not a nonprofit, right? We're a for-profit company with a really strong social mission. And I think that's what's different about us.
So I have to tell you, I wrote down disrupt with honesty because I love that so much. and I'm sort of laughing to myself because we deal with that every day. It's people always look when we're on panels with bankers, people always look at us and they're like, you're not a banker. And like, no, I was a small business person just like you. And, 90% of the time you've got these finance types, these bankers that are trying to sell you stuff, and they're just trying to confuse you. They use really big words that nobody understands, and they're just trying to intimidate and confuse, as opposed to just use normal language. And just like you, we very often, if someone comes to us and they have a great solution, or, we've had someone come to us and their customer pays them religiously in 15 days. I'm like, well, then you should just invoice them and wait. I mean, we're not going to help you that much. And they always look at me like, you're telling us not to use it, which of course makes them want to use it more. But I'm like, no, that's that if it's not going to add value, why would I want you to use it? And, just the other day I had a client call us and they said, some factoring company reached out to them and started talking about how they needed to switch and this, that, and the other. And it's like, that is the frustrating industry that we exist in, because that's the world people are used to. It's very predatory, which is unfortunate.
And I think it's a funny thing to be in an industry that is so predatory, and also that's so incestuous, right? Like the players have been around for a really long time, and so people expect that you have been around for a really long time. And what I always say is like, we want to outlast the relationship you have with your technology. We want this relationship to outlast that. So we want to be around longer than the next rendition of whatever the technology is that you're having. So when you have that mentality of wanting to be a long-term partner, then it's different. It's not just a quick buck mentality. And I think that customers sense that when they know they're working with someone who has their best interests at heart. And I think that's what's super critical to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why when I met you, I was like, oh my gosh, we have got to share what Samantha's doing with all of our clients, with all of our partners, with all of our employees, because I feel like, we both think about this kind of total payment solution, not from the perspective of the technology piece, but what can it do for the user? And, I when I was growing up, one of the things that used to frustrate the heck out of me is I would sit at these conferences and there was always a speaker that would stand up there and they would say, you have to do what you're passionate about. And while I think that was supposed to motivate me, it really frustrated me because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm passionate about. Not because I didn't have anything. I had a lot of things. There's a lot of things I can be passionate about. But what I realized midway through my career is you don't have to be passionate about what you do. You have to be passionate about the so what that you do, the impact that you have. And I tell people every day, there is nothing about Now Account that you couldn't change, except you cannot change the impact it has on a business. That's what I'm passionate about, is helping small businesses, make payroll, hire 5 new people, grow their company 3x in a year. That you cannot change. How the report works, go for it. That we can always improve. But having that passion for the impact that you have, I think is so rare. So
by the way, I just love what you said, because I've always hated that career advice of find something you're passionate about, because I really think that it's so much more important to work with a company that you feel strongly about. Yeah. People would say to me, I came from media. And so they'd be like, how could you suddenly be excited about talking about credit cards? And I'm like, there is nothing more exciting I've ever done. And I really believe that. Like, this is my favorite thing I've ever done professionally, because I know we can make a difference. And I think that so many people, especially our peers, are caught up in disrupting the technology. And I'm like, go do that. There's always going to be a greater, better technology solution. But I think that there's so much opportunity to disrupt the way that technology is delivered. And that's what we're doing.
Well, and it's interesting, if you're passionate about the what that you do, if you get caught up in the technology and the coolness of the widget, the reality is you don't listen very well. Because if I had designed like these glasses, you can tell I have lots of these sitting around. If I had designed these glasses and I was really passionate about it and you made a suggestion for how to make them better, I'm inherently going to defend it. Because I'm like, well, this is my baby, right? Like, I designed this. What do you mean it could be better? But if your passion is in the impact it has, like if what my passion is helping people see better, then I'm all ears when you suggest things. And so, perfect story today, every morning we do a sort of kickoff at 9 a.m., little huddle with our entire team. And we had an email last night from a client that was just raving about one of the people on our team and how, it had taken her a while to figure out how to best use Now Account, and that she was really thankful that he stuck with her and that he was patient and that he sort of helped her get it going. And it almost brought tears to my eyes, because nothing about it had anything to do with how Now Account's technology worked. It was all about the fact that Joey on our team cared about her and her business enough to want to see her be successful. And so it is, your passion has to be in the impact, not in the what that you're doing.
No, it's so beautifully said. I love that.
Yeah.
So true.
So why don't you share a little bit about our partnership? We've only just met in the last couple of months, but we were certainly like soul sisters when we met in so many ways. And, I think we both were coming at this huge opportunity of helping small businesses and helping people who maybe have not had a voice or have not been playing on a level playing field, either individually in their career or systemically as a small business. And we've come together and kind of put together this idea of a really holistic approach. So,
well, I mean, I don't want to, overblow the one-stop shop thing, but in many ways, I think our partnership creates this one-stop shop for businesses who are focused on selling to other businesses. And, we have a bunch of business to business clients. Those are in many ways some of our favorite clients, because we love working with them and they really do need payment solutions. Sometimes people think the only people who need payment solutions, the only businesses that need payment solutions are the small ones on Main Street, but that's absolutely not true. And I think that one of the reasons we're so excited about Now Account is because I love this idea that a business has options. and they have options. And when in our sort of marriage of our companies in this partnership is the idea that when a business who is focused on other businesses comes to us, we have this plethora of solutions that really fit whatever their needs are with their customers, and it makes them appear more client-centric to their own customers. And I think that is so critical because, you know, as payments changes so fast, it shouldn't be up to the businesses to have to figure out how it's changing. That's our job, right? Our job is to be on the pulse of payments and figure out what the latest and greatest products are. And who knows, in a year, Now Account might have a different kind of approach and an additional offering. And I think that's the exciting thing, is that no matter what those evolutions are in the technology around what we're delivering, we will be the ones delivering it. And so we're taking that ownership off of the businesses sort of back. They have enough to worry about without having to ever think about payments. And I think with Park Place and Now Account behind them, they don't have to think about payments anymore. And that's what I love.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, you know, I know what we were excited about when we first met you is our clients come to us a variety of ways. Many of them come to us from their investor, from their banker, from their customer. You know, they're selling to Coca-Cola and Coke says, look, we're going to take 90 days to pay, which I don't even know how you say that with a straight face, but you do. And so if that's a problem, you should get a Now Account. But what we kept hearing from our clients was, we love the fact that we're getting paid immediately, but what about if our customer wants to pay with a credit card? Or how do we think about how do we think about our payables? How do we think about, if you get us paid right away, how do we hold on to that cash longer? And so they actually kept coming to us saying, can you build out these other pieces? Could you build out an accounts payable side? Could you build out this? And my reaction was, you know, other people do that well. And so when we met you, and you guys really just, again, I think it's because you were focused on, at the end of the day, you are a client-centric company, and your goal is to help these businesses grow. Payments just happens to be the conduit that you use to do that. And we were very similar. So I was like, oh, we found someone who kind of serves the other side of the coin. And
I think that, I mean, one of the great things is that both you and I are myopic about our missions. And, you know, I think there's a lot of chasing shiny objects when you start a business. And I think we're so much better off having a partnership with a company like yours than trying to develop something like that ourselves. And I do think that businesses don't know this exists. And along those lines, for anyone out there who are our current customers or account executives or anyone in the audience who's listening, can you explain, because I think some people might not understand the difference between Now Account and a loan and Now Account and factoring?
Yes. Well, so we call factoring the F word at the Now Account office, and anyone who's ever used factoring knows why we say that. So obviously, if you get a loan, the money that you now have, that's not your money. That's the bank's money or the lender's money, and you owe that money back with interest. So if you deliver your good or service and your customer's taking 30 plus days to pay, and you go get a loan, you haven't really solved the problem. Your customer is still using you as a free bank. You've covered up the pain a little bit because you've drawn down on this loan, but you owe that money back. And so it's a liability on your balance sheet. So it's sort of like, my knee hurts, so I'm going to take Advil. And now my knee feels great, but you better not go for a run because your knee isn't really healed. You just sort of covered up the pain. So Now Account is completely off balance sheet. There is no borrowing. The money that you get when you process on your Now Account is your actual revenue. It's not an advance against your revenue. It's not a loan while you wait for your revenue. It is your revenue. You get your revenue in the form of cash immediately, just like if you accepted a Visa or an Amex or a MasterCard. When you accept that credit card, the money you get is your revenue immediately. And for the service of getting that revenue faster, you pay a merchant fee. So Now Account really is closer to what it feels like taking a credit card. That's the transaction that's going on. The only difference is there was no card. So you choose to get paid that way as opposed to your buyer choosing to pay you. Factoring is another interesting comparison because factoring means a lot of different things. The true definition of factoring is when you sell your receivable at a discount to a factor. And in that case, the factor would now own that receivable and you would pay a discount and then you'll pay some interest until your customer pays that invoice. The problem with factoring is it's typically not very accessible to small businesses. And the factoring that is accessible to small businesses is called recourse factoring, which is really lending. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so when you use a factor, again, you're going to get a payment immediately, usually maybe 85% of the invoice, and then you're going to pay a percent of the funds outstanding. And if your customer takes 30 days to pay, your fee is one thing, but if they take 90 days, it's much higher. So you're still bearing the risk of when the customer pays in your fee. And if they don't pay, it often gets charged back. With Now Account, again, it feels just like taking a credit card. So you deliver the good or service to your customer, you process the transaction on your Now Account, you get paid 100% of the invoice immediately, minus your 3% merchant fee. So it feels exactly like a Visa. You book your revenue as cash and you book an expense. When and if the customer pays the invoice is not your problem. Just like when and if you pay your Visa bill is not Starbucks' problem when you used it to buy your coffee this morning. So what we've really done is solved the problem that used to be solved with a line of credit or factoring, but instead of using finance to solve it, we used payments to solve it. So we really borrowed from the innovations of the credit card world, but made it work for B2B.
Love
so
it.
Yeah. So one thing I want to do, just to be conscious of time, we have about 10 minutes left. And I thought, Sam, that you and I could maybe just share one or two things that struck us in the conversation as a takeaway. So if you tuned out for a minute while we were talking and you missed something, I'm going to share just the 2 or 3 things that I heard in the conversation that I hope you take away. And then we're going to open it up for questions. So my 3 things that I heard was I love this idea of using payments as a service to your customer. So giving your customer that flexibility of how and when they pay is valuable. And it's really a way for you to think about not only what's good for you in terms of how you get paid, but can you do something for your customer that's good for them? I also love this idea of using payments strategically as you think about your business. And so taking it from something that's more tactical to really being a strategic decisioning. And then my favorite is disrupt with honesty. I wrote that down and I'm going to remember that forever because you're so right. If you can disrupt by simply being honest, that's an industry that should have been disrupted a whole long time ago.
Well, I love that. And I think that my favorite takeaway is actually your story about the woman that suddenly won all the RFP because she was offering this new way of getting paid. And I think that's extraordinary. And I love that. And I hope that everyone listening just thinks about that. Like, how can you, instead of using it as like a point of saving money or saving time, it's actually a point of differential in terms of how you're delivering your service and or product. And I love that. I think also this point about the fact that your payments is a reflection of the brand of your business, and the way you do business doesn't end after the person decides to purchase something. It actually doesn't end. And in many ways, the most important part and the most emotional part of that transaction is that final transaction is the payment experience. Yeah. And so the more you can do to make that payment experience painless and even enjoyable because they have a good relationship with their payment provider, that is something that is really, really critical, is that final experience is the most emotional part of any purchase, whether it's a business to business purchase or a B2C purchase. And how can you make that as painless and easy as possible for the customer? And then finally, just that, I think for both of us, like the technology changes are always going to come and go. And we're disrupting it from this industry from the people perspective. And I think just getting your heads around when you are a business who's selecting the people that you work with, whether it's vendors or whether it's your payments provider. It's being thoughtful about who's delivering that, because every person or every vendor, every relationship you have in your business is a tentacle of your brand. And so if you can make sure that those tentacles are all relationships you're proud of and you stand behind, then your business is going to win.
Absolutely. So I was chuckling. If my husband heard you say that I should make the experience of paying for something a joyful experience, he would probably laugh, because he would be like, I think she enjoys spending money. He would love that. All right. So we're going to open it up for questions. And I know that Selena is kind of watching the questions that people have put in. So if there's any questions you have, feel free to type them in and we would love to answer them.
I see a couple of hands raised. Selena, are there specific questions? I see Mara's hand is raised. Mara Wiener. I think you have to unmute.
I know, that's what I'm like. Okay, here we are. Yep.
Thank you. So when we're talking to a customer, what are we saying to them to introduce now?
Yeah, I think the way to introduce it is, if a customer is used to taking credit cards for payment, the real question is, do you have other customers that are not willing to pay with a card? Do you have commercial accounts who require invoices? And is that painful for you to have to wait to get paid? If they'd like to get paid immediately, but their customer's unwilling to use a card, now there's another solution. So we always say to our clients, if your customer offers you a card, take it immediately. But if they won't offer you a card, now you have a solution to get paid immediately. Is it still, do I have to, did I mute you again by accident? There we go.
Thank you. So is an example like when a hospital sends out a PO?
So not a purchase order. If the hospital sends a PO to like a doctor, they're to purchase something, it would then be the doctor that's invoicing for the services that they provided when they came in and did that service.
Okay.
So it's usually the supplier of the good or service. When they ship their product or they deliver their service, they then send an invoice, which is a request for payment. And that invoice can be paid immediately.
Laura, can you talk about the boring logistics of actually setting up a Now account? How does it work as Park Place is sharing this with our community?
Yeah.
You know, how does it work? And we talked about our process with the payment checkup. What's yours?
Yeah. So with Now account, if you go to the website, there is a button that says see if I qualify. And it's a very easy process. You're putting in basic information about just you, what your business does, when you started it, where it was formed, who your customers are. And with that information, within 24 hours, you'll get an initial response back saying either you're qualified or we can't find you in our database. Can you provide more information? Or we might say that we use what's called an SBFE score, which very few people know they have, but it's called the Small Business Financial Exchange. And if that score comes back below our threshold, we will tell you how you can get your report, because we can't see your report. We just see the score, and it's not your D&B. It's not what you're used to seeing. So if the score is lower, then we will give you the information to get your report. And then our business advisors are happy to sit down and go through that with you, just to look and see, is there information on your file that's an error, which happens all the time if there's another business with a similar name to yours. So we do have a team of business advisors that are happy to understand who your customers are, what their normal payment behavior is, where your pain points are, and then suggest the best way that Now account can work for you. So, you know, I shared the example earlier of the woman selling fuel who used it to get larger contracts. We've also had clients come to us and they will use their Now account to get paid immediately so that they can go to their supplier and negotiate a discount if they pay faster. So again, it's a way of saying, okay, if Now account's going to pay me in 2 days, then I can go to my supplier and say, well, if I pay you in 5 days, will you give me a discount? And so we are more than happy to brainstorm with our clients, what are some of the dynamics of your business, so that we can help you figure out how to use it really creatively.
So in the
And
case
similarly,
of,
if there's clients out there that want to learn how to get a free payment checkup, all they do is go to our website,
Yep.
parkplacepayments.com, or they can contact me directly at sam@parkplacepayments.com if they have any questions.
yeah, and if you're a client of Park Place, you can talk to your account executive, and if you're a client of Now, you can talk to
Yep.
the
Absolutely.
team
Talk to your
there,
business
and they'll
advisor. Yeah.
and they'll make the connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna, one of the things we're gonna do, this was our first webinar together, but obviously, we both love to follow the trends in the industry and then, work together to get that information out to you so that you can take advantage of these innovations as we see them. And same thing, when we see someone use a tool in a way that creates huge value, we love to share that with our other clients to say, oh my gosh, we never thought of this. This client used it to make an acquisition. Here's how you can do that. So I think you'll see more of this from Park Place and Now together, where as we see innovations, we'll figure out a way to share them with our respective ecosystems so that everyone can benefit from them.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Absolutely. It's exactly 3:00. So we have done a fantastic job of being respectful of your time and staying exactly on our time. But if you need to reach either of us, you can go to either nowaccount.com, Park Place Payments. You can reach out to us individually. You can reach out to us through the website. You can reach out to us through social media. We are both so passionate about helping small businesses, and we're even more excited to do it together.
Lara, thank you so much.
Thank you. Absolutely. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.